Hey everyone, welcome to my new tutorial. So as you can see, I have a new studio setup now. It's not much and it's still a little bit rough around the edges, so there's like a socket visible somewhere and stuff like that. But it now allows me to have a dedicated space to create and record my content, to record more videos, maybe try something new, some new formats. So I'm really looking forward to try new stuff, but that's a topic for another video, because today I just want to show you another cool illustration to make. And right now we are full in the festive mood, so it will be this cool winter themed North Pole inbox you can see here, and I really hope you will enjoy this one. And if you do, please don't forget to leave a like, it will really help my channel. And if you're new to the channel and you'd like to see content like this in the future, please hit that subscribe and additionally bell button if you want to get notified when I release something new. And if you're new to the world of 3D and Blender and you want to become a 3D illustrator, go and check out my courses that are carefully designed to teach you beginner and intermediate skills in quickest and most effective way. For example, with the new Ultimate 3D bundle, you can go from simple cubic designs all the way to full character illustration in a matter of weeks. So if you're interested, please go check out the link in the description. And let's jump right into empty Blender file. And as you can see, I'm using Blender 3.4. The latest release, but don't worry if you haven't upgraded yet, it doesn't really matter. We won't use any of the new features right now, so let me just close this. And first of all, let's delete the cube and the light. We can leave the camera, we can make use of that, so let's hit delete. And now let's press Shift A and we'll create the pole. So let's create a circle and let's modify this to something like 16 vertices. And we can press tab and scale this down, make it really smaller so we don't create the mailbox too large, so something like this. And now press E then Z and extrude this up and press S to scale it up tiny bit. So we are creating this like a stylized version of a mailbox, so there will be a lot of these cartoonish distortions. So let's now hold Shift S and snap cursor to select it, and now I will tab out of this edit mode and let's press Shift A and we'll add a new object. And let's start with the cube here, and now we can tab in and press S to scale this down, something like this. And we can press S then X to scale it on X axis as well, and G then Z to move it slightly up like this. And this will be our main mailbox shape. So let's go for edge select by pressing 2, select these two edges by holding Shift, and let's press Ctrl B to enable bevel and increase the number of segments with the mouse wheel to something like this. And when the middle edges touch, just click the left mouse button, and now we'll zoom in and switch to vertex select, because we now have two vertices right next to each other. So we want to select them all, press M and merge at center, and do the same for these one in the back, so we have only one edge here in the middle. Now we can press 3 for face select, select this front face, and let's press Shift D to duplicate, right click to release in place, and P and then separate by selection. So this is separated into a new object that's created right here. So right now we can just select the front face, press X and delete faces, and here in the back we can select this part and press S and scale it down. So this is another one of these cartoonish distortions. Maybe we can bring this down a little bit, and I don't like how this peeks out through there, so let's select this pole and press G then Z and bring this down like this. Now we can select the mailbox, tab into the edit mode and press A to select all, and Alt E and extrude faces along normals, and let's go inside like this. And additionally we can press S for even scaling, just like that. Okay, and now just to be safe, press A to select all and Shift N to recalculate normals. Now we can tab out and unhide this object right here. Let's select it, go into the edit mode by pressing tab and go for edge select, select this edge and hold Shift S and snap cursor to select it. That will snap the cursor right there. So now you can tab out, right click and set origin to 3D cursor. So the origin point of this new object is right there. So now it's easy to just press R then Y and open it like this. And this is very useful if, for example, you would animate this. You would have no problem like opening the mailbox, animating it by only keyframing the rotation. So something like this here. And now tab into the edit mode, press A to select all and extrude. Now if you want to get really fancy, you can create a hinge there. So let's press Shift A and we can add a cylinder. Let's modify it to something like 12 vertices and tab into the edit mode, scale this down. And I will press R, then X and 90 to rotate this 90 degrees. And press S, then Y to scale it on Y axis. And of course we can tab out and press G, then Z to bring it up slightly and to forward. So we have like a small stylized hinge here. And here on the right, you know, there should be this like an indicator that the mailbox is full. And I want it to look like a candy cane. So let's Shift right click here to place the cursor and press Shift A and we'll add a single word. If you don't have these options here, just go into the edit preferences, search for add-on section and there search for extra objects add-on. No need to download anything, just activate it and you will have all of these options when you press Shift A right here, including the single word. So let's add it right here. And now really make sure you are in the vertex select mode. So let's press 1 and press E, then Z and extrude it like this. Now on the X axis, so press E, then X and then E and Z to extrude this back down. Now let's select these two words and let's press Ctrl Shift B to enable vertex bevel. And let's do a bevel just like this here. And again, we have the similar situation. So let's select these two, press M and merge them at center. So now we have these edges and we can just tab out, right click and convert to curve. And now this is easy in the curve settings to go to the geometry section and increase the depth for the beveling to create a shape like this. And let's increase the resolution to 6. And now we can just, you know, let's fine tune this a little bit. And right click and convert back to mesh. So we now have this nice pipe mesh and we can go ahead and do some adjustments. So it's then easy to add a material to that spiral pattern. So let's go to the modifiers tab and let's add decimate modifier right here. But before we go any further, let's go into the edit mode and we need to add some more loops. So let's press Ctrl R and with the mouse wheel increase the number of cuts so they roughly match the sizing of these segments on the bend. So something like this maybe. And now we can tab back out and choose the unsubdivide in the decimate modifier and increase the iteration. So this now created the spiral pattern and let's just press G then Y and move this outside tiny bit. And before we apply the modifier, we can go back into the edit mode and alt click this loop here, press F to fill and Ctrl B to bevel, and again adjust with the mouse wheel. And I think just one segment will be enough here. I don't want it too complicated there, and let's do the same down here. So alt click the loop, press F and Ctrl B to bevel. And now if we tab out, this decimate unsubdivide modifier applies here as well. So now we can just go ahead and apply this. And basically that's all we need to do. Now just right click and shade smooth and our candy cane is ready. Now let's take care of these other shapes. So let's select the mailbox and let's add a bevel modifier and increase the segments to 2 because there is a lot of geometry to be made. We want to be sure there is enough of definition. And now in the geometry tab, let's switch this to arc. So we have these nicer corners and disable clamp overlap in case, you know, we have some issues somewhere. And for now we'll leave the shading as it is. So let's select the mailbox cover and the hinge and hold shift and select the mailbox as last. And now we can copy to select it and right click and shade everything smooth just like this. And now let's fix some shading issues we have here. So first of all, hinge, you can see this weird crease, and that's because the angle is too low for the 12 segment cylinder. So let's increase this to 35 degrees and that should fix the issue. And for these two, since we have a lot of flat surfaces, we will need to enable harden normals. So let's hold shift, select both of them, go to shading and let's hold alt key so we apply these harden normals to both of those. Now right click and shade auto smooth and increase to 180 degrees, and that should make these surfaces look a little bit better. And now one last thing, let's select the pole here, go into the edit mode and let's add some loop cuts here as well. So Ctrl R and create something like this, for example. Right click to release. And now let's look from the front by pressing 1 on a numpad, and I want to hit period on a keyboard and switch to individual origins. And now we can hold Alt, Control Shift and press S to enable shear, and press Y for the axis, so we are able to tilt this just like that. And now we have some interesting stripes there. And of course we can select all, press R, then Z and 45 degrees, so it's a little bit tilted on that side as well. Now tab out and right click, shade smooth. So these are the basic objects, and now we'll need to create, you know, the terrain, the snow, some envelopes lying around and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and do that. So hold Shift S, snap cursor to world origin, and let's press Shift A and we'll add a circle. And now I want to add more definition here, so something like 64 vertices. And now let's go into the edit mode by pressing tab. Let's go for vertex select and press Ctrl F and grid fill. That will create a structure like this. Now we can hold Alt and select these sides, but we need to additionally hold Shift and select all 4 of those and press E, then Z, and extrude them down like this. And now we can press O for proportional editing, press G, then Z, and just start moving this down just like that, so we create this little like bump. And now press G, then Z again, and let's reduce the fall off of the proportional editing. So we are basically just moving the sides here just like that, and a little bit less even. Yeah, something like this should be okay. And now if you look from the side, this is not too pretty, but I will probably just cut through this so we don't have to deal with this weird geometry. So let's select the knife tool, press C, then A, so we can cut through, and let's confirm with enter. Now if you go into the X-ray view and select all of these vertices down there, press X and delete vertices, you will be left with something like this. And now you can select this edge, press E, then Z to extrude it down, and press F to fill and I to inset, so we have some supporting loop down there. So now if you right click and shade smooth, you have a little ground base, and we can go ahead, go back into the edit mode. Let's disable the X-ray view, and with the proportional editing still on, let's switch this back to the medium point. We can just select some of these vertices and start moving them around, so we create some of these, you know, smaller bumps, so this doesn't look so uniform here. But nothing too crazy, something like this. And we can always press Ctrl 1 to add subdivision modifier, so we add a little bit more of that smoothness. So that's for the base. And now the snow on the mailbox, that will be pretty straightforward. Let's tap into the edit mode, let's go for 3 and face select, and select this face right here, hold Ctrl and click there on the other side, so we select the whole loop there. And let's press Shift D to duplicate, and again P and separate. We will reuse the geometry again. And now if you tab out, select the new object and tab in, you can just press A to select all and Alt E to extrude faces along normals, just like that. But now we'll need to remove this bevel modifier, so we get rid of that supporting loops. And now while this is still selected on top, I want to do a small trick that will enable you to delete all of these faces at the bottom, you know, without selecting them manually. So let's press 1 for vertex select, and let's press Ctrl I to invert the selection. And now if you press X but choose faces, you will delete all of the faces between these vertices. So if you go to the X-ray view, there are no faces at the bottom, which is exactly what we need here, because we need the snow to be looking that it's stuck on the mailbox. And it's exactly what we can do now if you tab out and apply, you know, subdivision modifier by pressing Ctrl 2, and we have now some snow. Of course you can subdivide these a little bit further like that, so you have more geometry to work with. And if you want this snow, you know, a little bit bumpy, you can always go back to the edit mode, and first of all let's select all, and now Alt Shift and deselect the bottom loop, and we'll add this to vertex group. Let's click assign, and now in the modifiers panel let's add displace modifier, and we'll choose that vertex group for the displacement. Let's create a new texture, and let's add a cloud displacement like that. Now if you tab out, you will see the result of the displacement. And first of all, we need to scale this up so these bumps are not so frequent, something like this maybe. And of course go back to the modifier settings and reduce the strength so it's very subtle. And now to connect this part a little bit better, you can go into the edit mode, alt click this bottom loop. If you enable X-ray, you will see how the whole loop is selected. And now just press S to scale, and additionally press Shift X to scale this on Z and Y axis only. So we cut a little bit into that geometry, you know, and connect it a little bit better. And then of course we can maybe scale this whole thing down on X-axis a little bit, so we give this a little bit more room. So these are like a small adjustments that you can make along the way. And now let's select the cane and let's tilt it outside a little bit so it doesn't get too much into that snow. And maybe if you really want to be detail oriented, you can just enable proportional editing and do a little reach like this here. Okay, so that's for the mailbox, and now we can maybe make this a little bit larger, and base as well. And maybe let's make this mailbox a little bit more thick by pressing Alt S, you know, and extruding this inside tiny bit. I really like this, so we can move on and create some envelopes. So let's press Shift A, we'll add a plane like this, tap into the edit mode, press S to make this smaller, and now we can press slash on a numpad to go into the local view, press S, then X, and now let's press E and extrude. Now this will be fairly simple and destructive, so let's press Ctrl R and create two loops right here, S then X to scale them towards the corners, and let's do the same along the Y-axis, S then Y, and scale them out. And now we can press Ctrl 2 to add subdivision modifier. And next let's create something like a stamp, so Shift right click to move the cursor, and let's add a plane, tab into the edit mode, and press S to scale this down, S and Y to change the shape a little bit. And if you want to place it better, you can tab out, press G, then Shift Z to move it on the surface. Now press tab into the edit mode, E to extrude, and now X-ray view, select the bottom face like this, press X and delete faces. And now if you add a bevel modifier, it will only apply bevel on the top edges, so you can reduce the amount, add segments, and you have a small, you know, stylized bump like this. And now if you go out of the X-ray, you can just move this up and down, you know, to better match your preference. Now select this here, tab into the edit mode, and we will go for face select by pressing 3, alt click this loop and press Shift D and P to separate to new object. Tab out, select the new object, tab into the edit mode, press A and S then X to scale it down like this. And again Alt E and extrude faces along normals. And we will do similar thing here, so let's go for vertex select, press Ctrl I to select only the inside vertices, and now if you press X and delete only faces, you will have this stick, you know, to your surface. And right now I will just select all, right click and convert to mesh. I want to apply the bevel modifier, the subdivision modifier, all of it, right click and just shade smooth, so we have a single object like this. And speaking of single object, we can hold Shift, select the envelope and press Ctrl J to join it into a single mesh, so we can manipulate and distribute it a little bit better. So let's hit the slash again, and we can just place some of these envelopes around. Let's press G then Z, move it up, and we can scale it down and move it, you know, here, so it looks like it's kind of falling out of the mailbox like this. And we can press Alt D to create a link duplicate, maybe tilt it a little bit, and some more like this. I think this will be enough. There might be, you know, some small overlaps, but the important thing is that it looks good from the camera angle. So now we can enable snapping, choose face project and project individual elements and align rotation. Now if you Alt D the object, you can hold Control and, you know, snap it on the surface anywhere you want. So let's do something like this here. So there are like envelopes lying around all over each other. Something like this here. And then we can reset the cursor again. Let's press Shift A and we'll add a plane. Now scale this up and move down so it sits at the bottom of the base. So now we can duplicate some of these envelopes around as well. And I really like to do this when I create the background and basically the illustration is some kind of, overflowing into the background. It kind of, scatters into it a little bit, so it's not so isolated and it kind of works like a cohesive result. So yeah, something like this, I really like that. So let's press 0 for camera view and we can go ahead and in the view section right here enable lock camera to view. So we are now able to position the camera using our viewport controls. And I really like something like this here. Let's disable this and we can fine tune the camera later. By the way, I mapped this to my Q menu, so if I press Q I have this option to lock the camera right there, and I recommend you to do the same. And now let's select some of these objects here and parent them to this pole. So let's press Ctrl P and parent the object so we are able to tilt this a little bit so it's not so uniform. And let's move the camera by using G. And now let's add some materials here. So I will hold Z and switch to material preview. And additionally, let's go to the render settings and in the EV section, let's enable ambient occlusion, bloom and screen space reflections to have a little bit of better preview, although we'll be rendering in cycles. So now we'll switch to the cycles and I will choose GPU here, enable some denoising, and in the performance tab, I will switch this to 512 for the tiling and reduce the samples to something like 512 as well. This should be enough for the preview quality. And additionally, I'll press Ctrl B and limit the rendering preview only for the camera bounce. So now if you preview the rendered, and let's press Shift A and we'll add a light, area light, press G then Z, move it up. We have a nice preview that only happens in our bounce. And let's now change the shape here to disk, and let's just drag this out so we can have a large soft light. Press G then Z, move it up, and let's try something like 150 watts for the power, maybe something stronger, maybe 300. We'll see how that works. Maybe this is too large and too soft. Okay, and now we are able to add some colors and some materials. So first of all, let's select the mailbox and we'll add some red color here. So let's choose something like this with a hint of purple maybe. So it's a little bit more sophisticated red color. And let's reduce the roughness to something really small like 0.1. This will be really shiny. And now let's select this here and create the white material. And again, we'll go low with the roughness. So it's kind of like a plastic white material or something like that. And for the hinge, we can create the metallic material. Even though this might not be visible, we'll see about that. So let's increase the metallic value here and maybe shift this towards like a gold, or brass color. And let's select the pole, now tab in. And of course, we can add the white material. Now let's go for face select by pressing 3. Let's hold Alt and Shift and select these loops just like that, and we can create a new material slot, choose red color and click assign. So we have this pole right here, and we'll do the same for the cane. So white material, tab into the edit mode and Alt click the loop to select it all around, and let's hold Shift and let's add these other ones just like that. Let's add a new slot here, choose red and assign. Now for the envelopes, I want to create a new material, something like a yellow paper, really subtle like this, like a creamy color. Now let's create a new material slot, tab into the edit mode, and just hovering over this middle part here, if you press L, you will select only connected faces, and we can assign this new material slot right there and choose the red material. Now let's do the same for the stamp. So let's select the top face, press L, hovering over it. Let's create the new material slot, and here I will create the new material, and this will be like a similar to that creamy, just a little bit darker, so it's visible there, but it's not intrusive in any way. And the last thing I want to create here is the snow material. So let's select the snow on top of the mailbox. Let's create a new material, and I want to leave this white, but let's choose the subsurface color to some like really subtle bluish tone, something like this, really light. And let's set the subsurface to 0.1. This will create that subsurface scattering that's really important for the snow. And let's add the same material down there as well. I'm not really sure which one it is because I didn't name it, so let's name it snow here. And yeah, basically this is it. Now for the background, let's create like a blue, light blue material like this. I really like this scheme, and when we look from the camera, it could use some camera lens effects. So let's select the camera, go into the object data properties, and let's enable the depth of field. Let's click the eyedropper tool and let's choose the candy cane here. And I really don't like how these envelopes are not visible, so I will drag some of them out, so the red part here, the red ribbon, is more visible, and it kind of looks like it's packed a little bit more. And now let's make this a little bit larger. So we have our focus for the camera on the cane, and now if we go back to the camera settings, we can reduce the f-stop, the aperture, to something like 1.4, and I still think the depth of field could use a little bit more presence, and we can work with the focal length here. So if I choose something like 85, you will see the depth of field becoming more present. If you go something like 120, it will go even more into the, you know, out of focus in the background, because it's really dependent on the focal length and the aperture size as well. So yeah, I really like this, and maybe it will get rid of some of that, you know, perspective distortion. So let me just go here in the output and change the resolution to something like 1600 to 1200. And we are not done yet because I want to add some effect like a snow here, and this will be fairly quick. So let's press Shift A and let's add a cube that will serve as a container for our snow. So let's press S, scale it up, and G then Z to move it up slightly. And right here in the render preview, I want to go to the materials and create the new material here, and I want to switch the principle to transparent. And you will see in the cycles it works right out the box, but if you switch the material preview, the Eevee won't support this, so you would need to go viewport display and switch blending mode to clip and shadow mode to none, so you don't have any shadows, you don't have any visibility there. And now if you enable scene lights and scene world, it looks the same, you know, as in Eevee. It's completely transparent box, and we can use it as a particle container. So first of all, I will press Shift A and add a round cube, and again this is part of the extra objects add-on. And don't forget to choose the preset to quad sphere and reduce to something like 4 divisions. Right click, shade smooth, and make this smaller, and we can just move this up so it doesn't get in the way, and we can add a snow material to it right away. This will be our snowflake, and right now if you select the cube, it's still there, only it's transparent. If you go to the particle settings, create a new particle, and let's set the frame start to 0, frame end to 0 as well, and as source we will choose the volume and reduce the number, so it's something really subtle like this, and then just make this smaller. And in the render settings, let's switch from halo to object and choose our snowflake. So let me zoom out a little bit, use the eyedropper and choose this. So you can see these snowflakes, but we need to increase the scale and scale randomness so they are not uniform, and let's play with that size. And I really like this so far, so let's just position the camera finally, and let's enable that render preview, maybe change this, scale this down a little bit, bring this closer so we have a more, you know, more dramatic lighting. And I would really like to add one another light, so let's press Shift A, add a point light, and just move it behind the pole here and add a little bit of a power, something like 50, and with a little bit of a warmer tone, something like this. So we get like this sunset feeling in the back, and of course we can choose this light and give a little bit of a warm tone there as well. And now in the world settings we can balance it out, some of that blue tint in the world color, and we have our illustration. I think this is a little bit out of focus here, the envelope, but I'm not sure yet, so it'll be more visible when we do a final render. So yeah, basically this is it. Of course you can do a lot of tweaks here. So for example, the base is quite large, so you can always just go ahead and, you know, enlarge the mailbox, enlarge the particles, you know, and shift your camera and do things like that, so you get a better composition out of this. But overall I'm quite satisfied, and as a last step I will go to the render settings, and in the color management section down here I will switch to medium high contrast and play with the exposure a little bit, you know, to brighten it up just a notch. So that's it for today's illustration. I really hope you enjoyed this one, and if you did, please don't forget to leave that like. It will really help my channel. And again, if you're new to the channel and you'd like to see more tutorials like this in the future, please hit that subscribe. Thank you all for watching and have a wonderful day.